Welcome to the place where we learn about and learn from the leaders in our field who are powering human creativity. I am Aaron Dworkin, and this is Arts Engines. Thanks again for joining me here on Arts Engines. Today's guest is Andre Dowell, who serves as the Chief of Artist Engagement for the Sphinx organization. Andre, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Aaron. So glad to be here speaking with you today.
So obviously it is extraordinarily my honor to be able to have you on the show. I've had the honor to be able to work with you for many years in my previous role at Sphinx, and obviously see the impact that you've had, not just directly for Sphinx but for the field as a whole. And so it really truly is an honor. I'm very excited to have you here.
I'm extremely excited to have this conversation with you today.
Awesome, awesome. So obviously, Sphinx has a host of different programs, but one of those surrounds the Sphinx Virtuosi. And specifically, there is kind of part of that Sphinx Virtuosi tour that takes place each year that happens at Carnegie Hall. So first, what I thought would be great is if you could just kind of share with us just a little background on what are what are the Sphinx Virtuosi. A lot of people may know the Sphinx competition and, oh, that comes around, Sphinx Connect, the conference, but who are the Virtuosi and what is that all about?
Yeah, thanks. So the Sphinx Virtuosi is actually an 18-member self-conducted chamber ensemble. So violin, viola, cello, and bass. And each year we do a national tour around the country. And actually we'll be making our international debut this year in Brazil. Excited to go to Brazil this year. But every year we do two tours, basically one in the fall and one in the spring. And we go into each community doing community engagement, working with presenters, working with community leaders and partners, really trying to expand our mission of the Sphinx organization of diversifying classical music. And so one of the things that we do when we go to cities is really go to the communities and work with them with institutions, whether it's schools, whether it's nursing homes, whether it's churches, to really show artists and audiences composers and music by people of color. And so the ensemble is composed primarily or all of Black and Latinx classical string musicians. So we're excited to do our tour this year. As you mentioned, we will be at Carnegie Hall on October the 13th at 7 p.m. We do have a partnership with Carnegie Hall and New World where we actually do commissions every year. So we're excited to get into the programming for that as well.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. And you mentioned too the obviously a string ensemble of musicians of color, Black and Latinx. And do they come from all over the country, or kind of how are they distributed in terms of where they come from?
Yes, that's a great question. So the majority of musicians actually come from one of our main programs called the Sphinx Competition for the nation's top Black and Latinx classical string musicians. So we have a junior division and a senior division. That competition takes place every year in February or January. And so the musicians are really chosen from that pool of people. They come from all over the country. And so these are the top musicians from our national string competition who come together every year as ambassadors for the Sphinx organization.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. So you mentioned that one of these key highlights for them on their tour is Carnegie Hall, the stage of stages. So could you share a little more about that and what, of course, might make it special this particular year?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we're actually celebrating our 25th anniversary of the Sphinx organization this entire year. And so all of our programming has really been centered around that, around our 25th anniversary. One of the things I'm really happy to share and excited to share with audiences is our complete program, which is by composers of Black and Latinx descent. So every piece that you will hear is either composed or arranged by a person of color. So we're highlighting composers like Jessie Montgomery, who's really hot on the scene. We're actually doing two pieces of hers. One of them is a new commission which is co-commissioned by Carnegie Hall, New World Symphony, who's a fantastic partner of the Sphinx organization, and of course the Sphinx organization. But we're doing a piece called Divided by Jesse Montgomery as well.
And could you just kind of, because I'm sure there are some out in our audience, right, who are, thinking to themselves, it would really be great if we diversified some of our repertoire. We want to do this. We potentially want to get into commissioning. You mentioned about collaboration. Are there any kind of key things that, in your experience, having been involved in so many commissions and collaborations, partnerships, you oversee, hundreds of partnerships, is there any suggestions or advice you would give to other organizations out there as they go about this work of trying to commission, working with a composer, working with partners? Are there any kind of key pinnacles or best practices that you found most helpful?
I would say one of the best practices, one of the best practices, of course, there are many, but one of them is realizing you don't know who you don't know, and you don't know what you don't know. So when you're going for these commissions, you really need to look for composers who you have no idea who they are because they're just not on, they may not be on your radar. For the Sphinx organization, we have been very fortunate to have an entire Rolodex of composers, Black and Latinx composers that we work with directly. But for other organizations, try not to use composers who are well known. But if your mission is to really diversify the repertoire, then you must do exactly that. And whatever that means, talk to composers that you don't know, bring someone on your staff, on your board, on your committee who's making these decisions to be on the committee to make recommendations of people that you may not be aware of. So when we approach these commissions, usually these are composers that eventually have illustrious careers because we get them early on when we've been doing kind of the nitty-gritty, the dirty work of finding these composers who have voices that really need to be heard.
For example, Jesse Montgomery, right?
For example, Jesse Montgomery, and not for our Carnegie concert, but for our Sphinx Virtuosi tour, we have a composer by the name of Michael Dudley as well, who will be very well known, but might not be on the radar of a lot of orchestras or those who are looking for new commissions and composers as well.
This is absolutely awesome. So you mentioned, Jesse, any other kind of key highlights for what's happening at Carnegie Hall? And again, can you share the date for everyone in our audience? So in case they haven't gotten their tickets yet or made their flight arrangements, if they're not in New York to come, what's that date again? And are there other composers they can look forward to on the program?
Absolutely. So October the 13th, it's a Thursday in New York City. Be there. It's gonna be a great concert. There's a lot of I think only one piece on our entire concert has been performed at Carnegie previously. So every other piece on the program is an arrangement or new commission that will be performed at Carnegie. We also have an exciting young violinist by the name of Amarin Olmeida, who will be making her Carnegie Hall debut. Xavier Foley will be doing a new commission and a world premiere at Carnegie Hall as well. And of course, we have the pleasure of honoring the founder, of course, at our Carnegie Hall concert. Of course, without you, this work would not be possible. And these voices, more importantly, would not be heard, and the audiences would not have this specific experiencing a complete concert at Carnegie Hall by composers of color.
It's really, truly extraordinary. And if you will, on both sides of the equation. So all of the musicians representing communities of color and the actual works being performed. And just love that it is the entire program. All too often, oh, there's maybe one piece, that type of thing. But the breadth of what the audiences will be able to hear is really, truly extraordinary. And this leads to, unfortunately, we're running a little short on time, but I wanted to get a little of your leadership so that our audience could kind of benefit a little from your approach, Andre, which is that there's got to be, when you're working with hundreds of partners and composers sometimes who are just they everything is delivered by deadlines, and then sometimes maybe not. And so you've got lots of things and things to juggle and balance, and coordinate while working with the entire team at Sphinx. And there's got to be tough days. Wondering, how do you draw upon for inspiration, for a sense of strength when it seems like things are too tough in life? Is there any advice you'd have for other leaders who might experience those challenges, especially when it relates to diversity work?
Wow, that is a huge question, and one that we could spend obviously hours on. How do you find inspiration when things get challenging, specifically in diversity in the arts? I kind of draw on my own history and my upbringing in the field of the arts, right? And so I'm from Tennessee originally, small town where no one really listened to classical music. And in fact, the first time I heard a live orchestra was my senior year in high school. It just wasn't something that I thought was for me. Classical music for people of my kind. I didn't know that that was for us. It was something that you saw on TV, right? And so, how do you find inspiration? I just remember my teachers inspiring me and telling me this is something that you can do and make a career out of it. So for now, my inspiration really comes from the individuals that I work with, and just seeing them and knowing what they're trying to achieve, and knowing that I'm also a connector. So if I know that you want to do X, Y, and Z, I know this person in this field, or if I don't know this person, I'll ask someone who may know that person and try to connect them. So I find great joy in connecting individuals and really understanding what it is that you're after, and finding a mentor or an avenue for you to achieve your goals.
It's so, so important. And I love that, because a lot of times, right, people talk about networking, so on and so forth, but actually hearing how functionally you're able to transform people's lives because of helping to make those connections when they just may not know that person or know that composer. So I definitely encourage everyone in our audience who's doing this work, and who might want to bridge to a particular person or a particular organization, please do reach out to Andre. Oh,
I'll
yes.
I'll
Yeah.
say one more thing, just from my personal history and background, is as we're speaking with individuals, understand the person that you're speaking with and what their goals are and what they have the ability to become and achieve. And I'll just say this very quickly. I was on my path as being a musician, not an arts administrator of any kind. And so one of the things that I credit the Sphinx organization for is finding talent and bringing that talent out, and understanding, you know what? Your resume doesn't fit. You may not have the qualifications. You may not have 5 years of experience in this particular field, but there is something about you that resonates with the work that we do. And what am I going to do? I am going to take this opportunity to say, hey, this person has the it factor, and I want to make sure that I'm a part of that. So for organizations looking to fulfill positions, or looking for composers, or whatever it is, look for the individual with the it factor, not necessarily the person that has the best resume.
Andre Dowell, you truly are one of the arts engines who is powering human creativity in our world. Thank you for your leadership. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me.